Many white American slave owners fathered illegitimate children with their slaves. How many, how were these mixed race child slaves treated by their masters or fathers? So, in the United States, once again, you had slaves who would live on the property of rich white men, and these rich white men would have their own families. Obviously, they would have their wives. They would have a wife. They would have children. They would have a whole household with multiple slaves who would run the household, and you would have slaves who would work on the farms and whatnot. And many of the slaves were women, obviously, right? Female African slaves. And it was not uncommon for these white masters to take multiple female slaves as their sex slaves, as their mistresses. And when you do that, you're going to father children with these unfortunate ladies, right? So many white American slave owners did indeed father children with their slaves. Now, in our culture, there is no concept of illegitimacy. There is no word for bastard in Sanskrit, right? There is a word in Persian, but not in Sanskrit. But in Christianity, you have the concept of bastardy, illegitimacy. William the Bastard, who eventually became William the Conqueror, 1066 AD. That's a different story. So many of these miserable, evil white slave owners fathered unfortunate, illegitimate children with their helpless female slaves. So these slaves, these children that were fathered, obviously were half black, half white. You could see that they were different. They were not completely of African origin. It was very clear. And many of them obviously would have some of the facial features and characteristics of the father. Now, when that happens, it causes a scandal. The wife will be unhappy. Society will see, and then they will talk about you behind your back. It will cause a scandal. So, what do you do if you are the guy who has done this? Well, you have multiple options. One is you make the children invisible. Don't bring them out in public. Don't put them in positions where they are public facing, and just treat them as slaves. Second, sell them somewhere far away so that nobody will see what you've done. And if a half white, half black slave arrives on a farm 200 kilometers away, nobody will realize what happened and who the father is. That's the second option. The third option is you actually give them some kind of benefits of being your child. So in some cases, some of these white masters would sometimes, give some kind of unofficial education, arrange for some unofficial education for their illegitimate children. And when they grow up, they would either be given privileged slave positions or they would be freed by the father. That was a minority of cases. In most cases, they would be treated just as slaves and the fathers did not care. They would either be treated as slaves and be brutalized just like every other slave, or they would be sold off somewhere else where the problem would go away. So one of the examples of these prominent white slave owners was the third president of the United States of America, Thomas Jefferson. He had this unfortunate mistress who was an African origin slave, and he fathered multiple children with her. And he never recognized the fact that those children were his descendants. And that was just the deal. So that is how these illegitimate children were treated by their masters, who also happened to be their fathers.